tell me how you define, how you think of transmedia storytelling.
Well, on Heroes we have this big mothership of the show, and this giant canon of content and mythology. And so what we try and do is tell a story that goes across multiple platforms, that digs into that canon, digs into the mythology, and makes it a sort of larger world for the fans to connect to. A lot of fandom is based on the idea of social currency, and your social currency is based on your knowledge of the show. So if you know one more thing than the guy next to you at school the next day, or in the water cooler at the water cooler next day, then you're sort of 1 degree closer to being cool as a fan. And so that stuff is really at the heart of why this transmedia idea works with our particular fan base, because our fans like to dig as deeply as they can into this show that they love and find all this information. And the real sort of goal of transmedia storytelling is to have aspects of the show that live in certain parts of on certain platforms and then migrate to others. So in other words, you'll have a character that lives on the show, and once that character has left the show, that character can now have an entire life on online comic books or websites, and sort of multi-user online games that you develop. It's a way to spread the sort of basic canon of the show as far as you possibly can. The transmedia philosophy of telling a story that is a continuation of a story that you didn't see the end of on Heroes. We took that to the idea of books. We wrote a book about one of our main characters is a Japanese character named Hiro Nakamura, and he has this very short-lived love affair with this waitress in Texas, and we go back and tell the story of their time together back in when he sort of time travels back. That we never saw on the show. We never saw that. We jumped ahead to the assumption that all that time had obviously taken place. But we did an entire book called Saving Charlie that was about the idea of that story. So that story lived on in book form. We compile a whole bunch of the web comics together and then sell them as a compilation. And so.
Oh, interesting. So I didn't realize that the books do start out as the web,
Yes.
the sort of graphic novel on the website.
So we run a graphic novel online concurrently with every single episode, and it's usually some storyline that is within the episode that then gets truncated on the show and then lives on, if you want to experience it, on this graphic novel that runs along with every single episode. And then at the end of the season, we take those and we compile them and do a compilation of it. So in this case, it was a 96-page compilation.
You strike me as someone who's kind of energized by the possibilities of all these new channels and new technologies, as opposed to saying, like, I just want to do TV, or I just want to do feature films, or I just want to do books.
Once your sort of brain starts to wrap around the idea of this new paradigm, the idea that story isn't sort of on a two-dimensional plane, but it suddenly becomes very three-dimensional. You can tell story that way, and you can tell story that way, and you can tell story this way. It gets, I think, very exciting. And for a show like ours, where there is such a deep mythology that we often only scratch the surface of on the show, we really do get to sort of exercise that idea of taking a story and having it continue to its logical conclusion. So that's obviously really fascinating. And then there is this whole sense of, like I said, when you realign your brain in a way to thinking about this, of almost the idea of using the whole buffalo. You're actually using every part of a story. So in other words, if we sell a replica of Hiro Nakamura's sword, then the box that sword comes in actually has a story on the back of it that you can read about that is nowhere else but on the back of that box. So even the selling of merchandise can fold in narrative in a way.
So you have this trilogy coming out, I guess, starting in 2010 called The Gate of Orpheus.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about just how you sold that book to the publisher.
Well, one of the things that I did was I didn't really know much about creating an actual presentation for how to sell a book. So I did it online, and the story has a kind of CIA conspiracy sort of vibe to the trilogy of books. So what I did was I created a website that looked like found CIA documents with lots of redacted pieces in it, and that was actually the entire sort of treatment and kind of presentation for the book. And then because it's a historical idea, there are lots of historical and actual characters and actual events that are in it. So at every one of those, they were hyperlinked to either a Wikipedia or a website or a YouTube video, so that as you were reading it, you could dive sort of deeper and deeper and deeper into the whole idea of the show. And then I had an editor friend that we sort of put together a kind of trailer of what this would look like, using all kinds of found footage and we edited it all together and scored it and presented that along with the proposal. And when we went to actually pitch the book, we sent out to everybody we were going to pitch. We sent the entire proposal on a flash drive the night before we presented it.
And all that stuff is still kind of top secret. You haven't posted the trailer on YouTube or anything like that. It seems like we're entering into this age, whether it's books or TV shows or movies, where fans want to participate in ways that they didn't before. And I think a lot of times creators can feel really threatened by that participation of, gee, do I really want you taking my characters and doing something that you want to do? How do you approach that issue?
Well, I think I've been sort of on a steep learning curve with this particular show, with Heroes, because it was designed, originally built into the DNA of the show, was this idea of creating this world of this sort of 360-degree platform around the show where people could enter. And one of the things that you really have to be aware of in a show like Heroes is that the audience is going to want to participate. They're going to want to guess and be right and be wrong and be frustrated and be mad, and they're going to want to create. Some of them are going to want to create their own content around the show. So we give them all kinds of opportunities to do that. We allow them to do all these kind of video mashups of scenes. We had a whole thing where they could create their own characters. It's a way to sort of encourage a kind of fan fiction. And now, having said that, we have a kind of tenuous relationship with that as well, because we can't really read it, or we're sort of. Fortunately, we make the show sometimes 2, 3, 4 months ahead of when we're actually, when the audience is actually consuming this content, and so.
And when you say you can't read it, you mean because the attorneys will get worried that if any of those ideas show up in the show,
I mean, the truth is, when you have a writer's room the way we do, of 10 or 11 people, really smart people that get in a room for 50,000 hours at a time, and we are going to come up with most ideas that anybody in the audience would come up with.
Right.
And so, and we will jettison about 90% of those ideas.
Thanks for doing this. It was a lot of fun.